On the target. Did you actually check?
Sure, it's on it.
You sure? You said that every time, like.
Put in your headphones, listen on your laptop.
Can't be sure. You just check to confirm.
Just put in your headphones, listen on your laptop, and I'll do the clicky thing next to it. Do we look even there?
Yeah, you can put up the display. If, is that on auto or on the camera one?
It's on the camera one then.
But that was okay last day, I think.
Yeah. You have to put it on auto to get it to register.
Weird. What is that?
Oh, do I need to put up the brightness? Forgot his beer now.
He's come back, sure.
Oh, yeah.
The,
Who's that?
No, not good. I look like I have high blood pressure.
Okay, back to normal.
Still have high blood pressure? Get that ice. There we go.
There we go.
Change the...
very harsh white light.
Let's change the clinical light anyway. How's it look for the guns? Oh, not good. We go with softer. Softer with the light. Go lower down though.
There we go.
No.
What? Less soft.
Go down. Down with the light. Lower the light down. Softer. Softer. No, it's something on the camera where I'm orange like, and then not my hair like. What's the ISO? Is that on auto?
They just put it to 0 now. It was up.
But it's on auto or on camera setting or on the video?
No, on video setting.
You can change the ISO, I'd say.
What are people counting? Oh no, that's good then.
No, that looks weird. I am. Is that a bit better?
There we go.
That was
We're using a very yellow light. 1300.
Oh, it actually just looks weird on your screen. It looks better on the actual live stream. See, look, it looks better here.
Yeah, that's perfect.
You got really high orange exposure or something in yours?
I don't know what orange exposure is.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thoughts on arm wrestling? I have no thoughts on arm wrestling whatsoever, I'd say. Just never really...
I've never had an interest in watching anything to do with it.
Alex sends us videos sometimes to kind of react to, but we've never really got around to it. It's getting weirdly popular, which is interesting.
Strangely popular.
I understand the appeal of arm wrestling. Like, it's a very basic, you win or you lose.
Manly.
What would... Do you know what actually kind of... Do you know, I have one thought on arm wrestling. It kind of concerns me, the guaranteed muscular imbalances you're going to get. Like, that bothers me in my head. That bothers me to think about. That, like, no matter how much training you do, because you're going to do all your sport specific practice.
No. You'll always be.
It's like archery. Like, it's just, I don't, it bothers me, the idea that you're guaranteed imbalances, you know?
Yeah.
At least weightlifting, it sneaks up on you, that hurts. You know, you never know where they're going to come from.
Well, it'll always be your knees and your back, like.
But you don't know
and
when.
Sometimes your shoulder.
You don't know when.
No, you don't.
But with arm wrestling, you know one side is just going to be a little bit more, you know, even if it doesn't look the same, your ability, your
even if it doesn't appear to be the same thing, it will be the same thing.
Yeah, like your proprioception of like someone goes push this side or push that side, you're going to know like that one side's just not as in tune. You're going to have all those, what are like the cross
the Canadian guy, like the best arm wrestler in the world.
Who's that?
Big massive guy.
They're all massive.
Been with Juji Mufu. He's been on like
no weight classes in the jungle.
But he changed arm.
No way.
Yeah, he was like one of the best in the world, and then he changed arm. Someone's definitely going to know his name. Massive, big Canadian guy. Really nice guy. Spent a good bit of time with Juji and with Magnus.
Aren't all Canadians?
Magnus Nitbo.
Aren't all Canadians?
Most Canadians are very nice.
Except for the city living ones, maybe. Afternoon, lads. Throwing at the moment, as you always are, Andrew.
Yeah.
If the new 25s in the gym, I'll be able to hit 225. If not, I'm going to bench 170 with a slingshot. Hope you guys are well.
Nice.
You know, slingshot would actually make sense
for throwers.
For throwing that overspeed stuff. But it wouldn't, unless you're benching 250, I don't know, would 170 be the right move? I would be looking at, if I was saying, if you're using a slingshot for weights, it's probably closer to like 100 kilos for Andrew if you want that kind of overspeed stuff with that kind of power training.
Especially with that for a thrower.
Yeah.
You really want to be moving fast, because the fact you say like, oh, I'm throwing at the moment, you know, like in season is the time you really want to move fast.
Like it'd be like 100 kilos for maybe cluster sets, maybe singles for as fast as possible.
Geez, clusters would be great. Like really fast back in the rack, really fast again back in the rack, like 30 seconds in between 4 or 5 reps.
Hands like this because you're in a slingshot.
Yeah, just like tucked in, you know.
Yeah.
Even you probably move, if you were able to do 170, you'd probably move 120 very, very fast.
With the slingshot on.
Yeah.
You know,
what's your full bench, Andrew? I assume 150 or north of 140 somewhere anyway.
Yeah. Hopefully he hits that 225 squat though.
Yeah. The squat will be much more beneficial.
Philippe is saying, hey lads, I want to get my brother to weightlift, but everything else, he pushes a bit. He starts having shin splints. How to proceed?
Did you say Philippe?
Yeah, weighted some. Is
that Philippe?
Yeah. So with shin splints, if it comes from running and stuff, usually it's an impact issue. Oftentimes you'll see people mistake tibialis anterior issues with shin splints. So unless you've got a diagnosis or extreme pain, a lot of times it's actually an issue with the tibialis anterior, the muscles. It could be adhesion points or trigger points or whatever they call them at the moment, or maybe a lack of control with them. It could be a muscular imbalance or something like that in relation to maybe your tibialis anterior in relation to the soleus or whatever. Best thing you can do there, though, is just take it to a good physio. Shin splints is a very common thing. So if you can find a good physio and you're like, look, this is what always happens. Because I don't think it's shin splints, to be honest, from weightlifting. It's likely some of the musculature as opposed to the bones in your lower limbs. So I'd say bring him to a good physio and proceed from there. And they should be able to give some good advice.
The only way I could see it being a shin splint issue arising from weightlifting would be if he's a younger athlete or like a developing athlete. And some of those bone plates or growth plates haven't quite filled in, then you get pain in the bone similar to a stress fracture, similar to a shin splint. But in that case, like you have to take off all loading, you know. So I would go to a physiotherapist or just any sort of physician and get looked at immediately. Elliot says good luck at the camp.
Thanks, Elliot. Who knows what'll happen?
Yeah.
What's an impressive strict press for an 81 kilo lifter?
100 kilos.
For a natural 81, I would say 100 kilos would be
very impressive.
That'd be so impressive. For an unnatural 81, if you could do like 120, that would be mental.
Yeah.
That would be mental.
That would be.
If we're talking impressive.
Yeah. I'd be impressed.
Yeah.
I think for most people, a good strict press is a body weight strict press. Particularly for most weightlifters.
1.2 is like the
1.2 is nice.
That's the legit
real
one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Andrew also said start uploading the podcast on Spotify. Andrew, if we had time to scratch our arses, we would put it on Spotify.
Pam is saying, on the jerk feedback you gave me last time, what's more important, the jerk with a fast dip and drive or keep the hips back? So they're not mutually exclusive or inclusive or exclusive. There's no one or the other with these, Pam. You have to do both of them. They're absolutely essential for good technique. There's no reason you can't do both of these as well. It's a failing on your own part if you can't do them. It's not a technical give or take, you know. So you have to. A faster dip and drive is essential because it's a power sport and requires a lot of power. So you need to be fast and smooth like a spring when you're trying to bounce as high as possible. So you don't jar and then let it go. Or you don't go down really slow and come up really slow. You go down and up as fast as possible. But then in relation to the hips back, that's essential as well because there is an area, there's a window over your foot musculature and it gets smaller as weights get heavier in relation to your body weight. So as they go up, this window of forward and backwards in which the barbell can travel gets smaller before the barbell goes too far beyond a certain point and you tip over or you are unable to produce maximum force with that. So neither of those are options that you can get by if you want to jerk big weights. So it's neither more important. You have to do both of them.
It's funny, actually, a lot of time we give people feedback, you'll give them 2 or 3 things to work on, and it's very common someone will say, oh, which is more important? Like, should I stop bending my arms while I clean, or should I straighten my shoulders and pull my shoulders back? If there's like technical feedback, we wouldn't be saying it unless you needed to fix both of them. Like a lot of the time you will just hear us give one thing for the clean or one thing for the snatch, because that is really the priority. When there's 2 things, you need to be able to fix both of them and don't necessarily go after one and then go after the other. As Garth said, they're not mutually exclusive. And then you ask, if both, should I reduce the weight? Yeah.
as you have been doing with him, you know the stick, and you've been quite good at fixing your stuff, but by reducing weights and being quite intuitive. So same stick. If you want to fix them, they need to be fixed. Then you need to reduce the weights, unfortunately, and practice them at appropriate weights.
Weighted some again says, are there any insane training lifts playlists I can delve into some sweet rabbit holes while I'm in quarantine? If it was me, I love the old Klokov training lifts. I love the old Apti training lifts. And I love the 2014 lead up of Illy Illen. Those ones for me are the ones.
There used to be a load of like YouTube playlists, and I think a lot of those have been kind of decimated because like the videos might have disappeared or they've been taken down or whatever. So I don't know of any recent ones. There used to be loads of them. People used to make them because it was so hard to find videos of weightlifting because it'd be so obscure. They'd be in like Russian and stuff, and there used to be those ones out there, but not anymore.
Ben says Sydney checking in. Welcome. Jeez, it's late in Sydney now, I'd say.
8 hours. Yeah, it is. Go to bed, Ben.
Go to bed, Ben.
Good afternoon from Alex. He's saying, do you think that Russians are doing international weightlifting again? Definitely again, but
it'll take a while.
To be honest, I think those sanctions from weightlifting federations and sporting federations will be lifted pretty soon after the situation comes to whatever apex it's going to come, good or bad for Ukraine involved, as tragic as that is. I think they'll kind of relax a bit and people will move on, and it's kind of terrible to say that, but that's how these things go. So it's likely, Russia may become like kind of a hermit kingdom, I suppose, but it's they'll be back for sure. Their younger team seems quite good at the moment. If you watch Yarkin's Instagram, they're in a training camp at the moment for Euros in May, and they're one of them was snatching like 190 F blocks and stuff, and they're coming back with a crop of lifters again. No crazy, unbelievable people, but certainly a session quality lifters. So they're still investing in weightlifting, so they're for sure. It's Rambo.
Everybody's saying Devon Larat.
Is that
I think that is the guy. Thanks, Rambo. You're a gent. There's a coffee delivery service now for the live stream. Ben asks, we get this question so often. Any books you guys can recommend both for training and general reading? To be honest, Gerf reads about 400 times more books than I do. In terms of training, I'll give the same advice as always for the books. I wouldn't go to books specifically on strength and conditioning. I certainly wouldn't go to a book specifically on strength and conditioning for your sport or a sport you're interested in. I would go immediately to first principles, particularly if you're looking to work in sport or work in coaching of some sort. I would start off, if you've an interest in biomechanics, I'd start off by getting a good fundamental understanding of physics. If you don't have an understanding of physics at like a high school level or a secondary school level, get one of your high school or secondary school friends to get one of their physics books and read that cover to cover. Just sort it out now and kind of get a basic understanding. Then if it's biochemistry or if it's biology you're looking to get involved in, and you have, say, a high school level of understanding, then just get a university level textbook and start reading through that. The great thing with that is you don't necessarily have to go through it cover to cover when it's particularly in the biology side of things or the physiology side of things. You can literally go and say, oh, my shoulder is kind of aching me. Let's have a look at the structures around the shoulder, and you could start reading into that. You could start reading into the circulatory system. You could start reading into the aerobic system, support systems of muscular contraction. The other massive advantage, I would say, and this kind of deviates slightly from the book side of things, is that there are more university lectures available online now than you could possibly imagine. You could literally do a university lecture on nuclear physics, and you could run basically their entire course. And most universities, or a lot of universities now, have a huge amount of content up free to access, and you could read through those and get a very, very good understanding. In terms of general books, I bought a book in the petrol station the other day that's called Historic Murders of South Cork, which is very interesting.
Is it good?
Yeah, very, very good. Reading about a murder in Novel in 1800 and something.
General books at the moment, they're pretty covered, a lot of the so Mediev for the sports specific training is a very, very hard read, so it's up to you if you delve into that kind of thing. In terms of general reading at the moment, I'm just reading Seneca's Dialogues and Essays and Epictetus's what I can't remember, what Productive Life or whatever it's called. So they're the two books I'm reading at the moment. In terms of like fiction stuff, kind of in a lull because there's a lot of shit fiction out there, and I've read a lot of the best fiction I have over the last fucking 20 odd years. So I'm reading Anthony Ryan's new book. It's not great. It's what's it called? I can't remember what it's called, but it's nothing spectacular. It's actually one of his worst books, which is disappointing because he's a load of great books. So
you feel left down by the author if
I
you're
do.
in. Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. That's a disappointing feeling.
Because he's one of my. I look forward to his books coming out.
Okay.
There's the best ones I've been reading the last while have been Mark Lawrence. He's been shilling out books every year, and they're all really good. I think he does a lot of coke though. I think he has that look about him.
It's big with the writer population.
Some of Stephen King's best books were written when he was on a load of drugs. And when he got sober, then his books changed. So I'm just saying, maybe he's happier, but are his books happier? That's the question you need to be thinking about.
Up next. So thanks for everyone who said Devin Larratt. But up next we have Ewan McGuigan, right? And
Can I give my opinion on this?
Yeah.
I don't think it's an S&C problem.
It's not an S&C problem at all.
I think it's just Scottish rugby.
Yeah. So Ewan, I'm assuming you're Scottish, and so don't take any of these comments personally. Mm-hmm. And myself and Owen certainly aren't playing professional rugby, but
no, we are not. Or any rugby.
So you see, so Scotland had a very good win against England or whatever, and now aren't performing exceptionally well this Six Nations. To be honest, I wouldn't put that performance or lack thereof down to an S&C issue. To be honest, I wouldn't put it down to an individual physical shape issue either. It's not that they certainly don't look powerful. They don't look fast, but they're not playing good rugby, and there isn't a massive crop of athletes coming up through it. Like, I think these days, to win Six Nations levels competitions, you need at least 40 or 45 international level players who are slotting into that international system without any friction. They understand the system and they play there regularly or semi-regularly. They are at a level where they can be competing regularly. So you need to have you don't need to have one good back rower or 5 good back rowers. You literally need to have 10 people who can slot into a number 6 shirt or number 7 shirt. Scotland have some of the best individual players in the world, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. They have some of the best individual rugby players you could ever see on a field. But the problem is the whole structure, and that the 30 players who come behind the 15 players who are on the field at any one point. That's what I'd see as the issue. And the kind of broader system then that's lacking underneath it. It's certainly a thing that we don't have yet in Ireland, but because of the success of Leinster and Connacht and Munster, there are more and more depth to that squad. Like the Leinster squad, Leinster could probably pick 2 or 2.5 15-man squads who could win a Heineken Cup or a European Champions Cup or whatever it's called now on any given day. And I think that's what you need. You need a country full of those clubs with that level of depth in their squads, and that's what will win a major championship. South Africa certainly have it.
Probably a cultural thing as well. I think there's hundreds of teenage boys who dream of playing professional rugby for Ireland, and also have the opportunity, and will go training 14 times a week if they have to when they're 17 or 18 and still try to do their final year exams and stuff, So I'd say there's nothing they could probably do right now. It's probably 15 years ago was what Scottish rugby needed to do, And
look, they've developed some phenomenal players. You have some of the best players playing world rugby right now in their positions. But I just don't think I don't think it's an S&C issue. Although their S&C could be better, I just don't think it's an S&C issue.
It won't win. Yeah, it won't win the games.
I'm going to play with the camera there for a sec. You continue on.
Alex Gee is saying made steady low bar squat progress, 180 to 210 in 6 months. Well done. To continue linear progression, do you think high bar is vitally important? Any other additional exercises you advise? So typically, if you look at what you would need to increase your low bar, it is high bar is a big one. Would you say anything is vital? Probably not, but that's as close as I would get to saying something is vital for your low bar progression. Beyond that, it's just practicing low bar as you have been doing. In some ways, it's all in your progression. All needs to be adding weights. It all needs to be doing kind of what you're doing, just in a little bit more nuanced. So there's no reason to particularly change. You don't need to move to conjugate. You don't need to be moving to surprise progression. You don't know what you're doing. Like, it's still linear progression to the best of my knowledge up until well into the 300s and beyond. And I don't think anyone will tell you different. So I would say high bar is vital? I wouldn't be saying vital, but I definitely think it's, from what we've seen, without a doubt, the most effective by far and away compared to any other assistance exercise we've seen for people's low bar. Like, it's just incredible compared to anything else. Yeah. All the other things are like little condiments, a little bit of salt, nice to haves.
Condiments.
But they're they're nice to haves. They're for example, you see in Hayden, we were doing the belt squats for additional quad work because you can only do so much high bar squatting. You've seen stuff like lunges,
safety bar squats.
No, you saw no safety bar squats.
No, but I'm saying that's what you would commonly see. Not, in my opinion, nothing can replace high bar back squatting.
Yeah.
And for those people who don't do high bar back squats due to possible previous knee injuries or quad issues or a host of issues where they decide not to high bar squat, I think, to be honest, they're held back artificially because of that decision or because of that restriction that's placed on them.
It's the 400 meter repeats to the 1 mile.
It is run. The potatoes, and everything else is the gravy that goes on the potatoes.
Yeah. You can survive without the gravy, but you need the potatoes. So I'd say keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing the low bar stuff. If progress has stalled, ideally you'd get in there a little bit sooner, and you'd have that intuition to maybe start thinking about adding in the high bar. But if you're on a train and you're on if you're on a roll, I wouldn't be too concerned about changing anything right now. I would wait till things top out, because sometimes if you're on a great progression, especially with the squat, I would just keep going.
And you know what? I'd keep chucking along for a very long time, even after progression is stalled, because a lot of the time you just need to accumulate more training volume, more time.
Yeah.
Like, if you've gone from 180 to 210 in 6 months, is that a 15% increase? 17% increase? It's a drastic increase in your 1RM in 6 months. Don't change anything yet. Like, don't look for a better teapot when the teapot you have is perfect.
How many more analogies can we do? I don't know. Nick Foster saying, any cues or drills used for fixing a bad tendency to turn the bar over too early in the snatch?
Finish your pull.
So a lot of times turning the bar over too early is just, turning their elbows over too early. So you'll see people in the snatch still get to around belly button height, and they're already trying to press the bar overhead instead of trying to pull elbows high for as long as possible. So tall snatches are, in particular, even better again, are no contact muscle snatches in the warm-up are a great one for that. They're the best two kind of drills that you can do, or best kind of productive exercises rather than drills, I would call them. And then in the warm-up and all your snatches, just focus on pulling your elbows high and not turning the bar over too early, like focusing on it. If it's a technical issue and you are doing something and you want to stop doing it and do something else, the best place to start is by starting doing the other thing and stop doing the thing you're doing. So that's like where you start. You try and change that pattern, and there's obviously things that can help you teach and learn. And there may be strength issues or mobility issues that you might need to look at. But the first place to always start is stop doing the thing you want to stop doing and start doing the thing you want to start doing. As mean as that sounds.
Okay, Johnny Brown says he did a podcast with Lex Friedman. I assume they're talking about the arm wrestler.
Devin.
Yeah.
The fella, I was thinking had a big mop of hair. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, big, massive fella.
This fella's bald, they say.
No. Devin's not bald.
Next
one is James Gallagher said, opinions on the usual powerlifting protocol of working up to a heavy set, usually a single or a double, then backing off sets.
Random.
Do you think this style of training is overused, particularly in powerlifting? Absolutely, it's overused. If one person in the world uses this style of training, it's overused. There's a very, very, very rare time when going up to a heavier top set and then dropping down and accumulating your volume can be useful. But most of the time, in most of your training, you want to be doing your working sets at the optimal weight. And you don't want, like, if you call a spade here, most of the time you go to the heavy set for a double or a single, you do it because psychologically you want some sort of boost of knowing that squat is there. And you really don't need to do that. You get nothing out of it. You lose out on the fact that you're going to fatigue your CNS. You're going to have less capacity to do the actual important volume when you're doing your training session. You're increasing the risk of injury because you're doing heavier sets at heavier weight. And then you take that sharpness off yourself when you actually do have to do heavy doubles or heavy singles in training. So I think a lot of people use it as like a psychological crutch for knowing that they're never too far away from being strong. Realistically, in training, a lot of the time, we spend a lot of our year or our multi-year cycle sub-maximally training, accumulating volume. You don't need to go up and make sure you can still squat those weights every week or every 2 weeks or every month.
So it's definitely the go-to thing for powerlifters now at the moment. Like, you look at any commercial gym, and I do be looking when there's powerlifters training. Basically, all of the vast majority will do like a top set and then drop sets. And usually, what ends up happening is they end up with a shitload of kind of junk volume because
junk volume. That's the fucking perfect term for it.
They go up to their kind of heavy set and they're kind of tired, so their volume they drop down to then isn't of great quality, and so they're kind of looking for, like, think about it this way: if we treat powerlifting like a sport, and we think about it in another sport specific activity, if we are 16 weeks out from our sprinting event, or we are 16 weeks out from our weightlifting competition, or any other number of things, we don't immediately just start doing that sport every day. Or if we're thinking about it as in a game of soccer, we don't play 90 minutes of soccer every single training session and then go do our training session. You don't do your full game of soccer or your full game of rugby or your full game of tennises and then go practice your drills. Like, you don't do that all year round, and there's definitely a place for your sport-specific practice. You have to be practicing singles, but people are way overestimating how long ahead of the time they need to be practicing their singles. Like, the practicing singles is literally 1 to 2 weeks beforehand, maybe 3 weeks depending on the circumstances, but mostly like 2 weeks beforehand is loads. If you're particularly bad at singles, maybe like that kind of 3 weeks out, but most of the time there's no need for that. In general, you just end up with a load of junk volume. I think, to be honest, it's kind of a gratuitous way of training. You're afraid to lose touch with your heavy weights. You change people's way of training and they're like, oh, I don't feel as strong anymore, or oh, I just don't feel the same as I was feeling before. And you're just entirely mistaking your feeling for being the correct feeling for how you should feel to progress. It's an incredible misunderstanding of what is going on, to assume that how you felt always is the best way to feel for progressing. If you need to change things and stuff's not going right, then make the assumption that what you're previously doing is incorrect. Another thing as well, I think, with that progression is the top sets and drop sets. Is a lot of the times, a lot of people that powerlifters see doing that are people who are taking a load of gear, and they may not be open about taking gear because they are probably competing the IPF, for example. And
hell.
And so if you are taking any amount of gear, especially a lot of gear, you could come in to do those sessions and then you have a shitload of productive energy left and adaptation energies ready to go do those kind of drop sets and top sets. Now, I'm not saying it's ineffective. Of course, any amount of strength training in any kind of progressive fashion will be productive, but there's certainly more productive and more precise ways of doing that in terms of kind of, classical programming. There's nothing wrong with it. People got very, 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 very strong doing it. and still do get very, very strong for doing it, and can absolutely smash their peaks when they need to for competitions. Sometimes you'll see the people who do that kind of top sets and drop sets is they'll get very good at repeating a particular number, and on the day they'll hit that kind of opener no problem. But then when it comes to absolutely hitting a 10 or 15 kilo PB on any one of their lifts, when they actually get to that day, is they've got nothing left because they've peaked so early. And they've got that kind of, they don't get that freshness of that peak, which is one of the things you get when that later phases of periodization is you get that kind of super compensation, and you get that drop off of fatigue, and you get this heightened curve of performance. So by the time you get to that comp day, you have hopefully narrowed that down to that particular day of competition, and you've got it correct. And then you get this big increase in performance is what you should be hoping for. Performance enhancing drugs or no performance enhancing drugs in powerlifting. Whereas a lot of times you see people who do this kind of top sets and drop sets are kind of slow. They'll hit their openers, but they'll have that post up then and after on Instagram saying, not really what I wanted, not the best day. You'll see that stuff. So look, we're not going to sit there and tell you it doesn't work, but there's definitely better ways of peaking for your competition. A good example is the Hayden series. We didn't do that with him. He peaked very, very well for it. So it's the one time I could see being productive is if you're getting back into shape and you want to get back into shape faster and you're an experienced athlete. So if you're someone who squatted like 250 before and you had an injury or whatever and you're back at like 150 now, you could go through those progressions and run through those multiple cycles of like those 10s, 8s, 6s or whatever and keep going through that. Or you could be like, after a couple of weeks, you could be like, okay, I'm just going to touch 180 today and see where I'm at and see how fast your progression is going. And you might get back to 200. And it could speed up your recovery process or your return to performance process a little bit faster. And then you could start the next training block as normal, But in general, I don't think it's the best way for every single powerlifting train. And it just seems like all of them train in that particular method. Unless there's something I'm missing, I generally don't think it's the best way. And we haven't seen that to be, and every year we coach more people, help more people get stronger, and the way we're doing it seems to work very well. So not knocking anyone's methods, but I definitely think it's something that's a little bit overplayed. I wonder why everyone buys into it. That's what I don't really get.
It's just this
the gratuity of it.
Yeah, so for a coach to give someone that, go up and do a top single, it makes the coach's life a lot easier because you're constantly staying in touch with that. You constantly know he hit 200 today, he didn't hit 200 today, he hit 180 today, he didn't hit 180 that day. It's a bit lazy is the other thing. It's like constantly opening the oven every time to look in at what you're baking. Every time you open that oven door, a small bit of heat escapes. You have to wait till it warms up again and you have to go again. It's a very dull blade for doing your surgery with. Erico Oliveira says, speaking of Magnus, where is the S&C coaches react to rock climbing? We have to do one, actually. The main disappointing thing with rock climbers, they're in phenomenal shape. They train really hard. They're great athletes. They are very impressive to watch doing their sport. But a lot of them, when you look at their gym work, just isn't. Like when you look at throwers in the gym, or you look at track and field athletes in the gym, or rugby players in the gym, there's a lot there, It's really enjoyable to watch. It's good stuff to watch. Some of the climbing S&C stuff is, it's just a small bit lacking, But we'll certainly do one. If you have names of climbers, obviously we know Magnus. We don't know Magnus. We know of Magnus. But if there's other climbers with like good amounts of S&C stuff up there, if you could put them up, that would be great.
Kind of Tick is asking when's the next Force Velocity. We've just been a bit off track the last few weeks. We're getting back to the regular series. So hopefully next week, literally thinking about which one today, which next Force Velocity, next pay-per-view we're going to do. I'm not too sure which one is next. We'll have to go back and look at what was kind of the most upvoted.
I think basketball is.
I feel like basketball was. Yeah, I think basketball was high up there.
Wendell says, I've been hitting PBs left and right. Is it because of the creatine I've been taking or the last 8 months of Sika weightlifting programs? I think it's because of the creatine, but Garth thinks it's because of the programs. Then he says, if I was to venture out into the Wilding program for myself, would you recommend using weightlifting programs as a base and tweak from there? Absolutely, yeah. If it was something that you wanted to get used to programming for yourself or coaching yourself and you wanted to start learning that. First thing you need to look at is the total things that are encompassed in the program. So a lot of the time people will just pick 2 or 3 things that they enjoy doing, and they'll write the program around that. And then suddenly you're doing these particular complexes multiple times per week, and you're not doing your strength work, or you're not doing your midline work, or you're not doing your stability work. So make sure your program that you're writing covers all of the aspects we need to cover. The next thing you need to look at then is what's realistic progression scales. So if you're used to doing a 5% increase or a 10% increase from week to week as you go through a particular complex or a particular lift, or if you're used to adding reps or sets to certain strength exercises, then you're probably going to be able to do that quite well again with the similar kind of effects. And don't expect you'll be able to do a lot more. So just use those as a kind of base, the same as you'd use a comprehensive training journal as a base as to how to write your next year. Those weightlifting blocks, those 8 blocks you have, will give you a very, very good base if you wanted to start tweaking and kind of playing around with your own programming.
When picking a ball from the ruck, why is the toe always off the ground in the Cossack squat? Why do they always do that? So when they sit into it, they always have the toe up.
Of the long leg?
Yeah.
Because if you've your toe down to the ground,
yeah,
you usually won't sit as deep. And as well, the toe down to the ground means all your studs in the ground.
Okay.
And if you get hit with all your studs in the ground,
okay,
the knee is...
Interesting. They love mustaches doing the All Blacks.
They love mustaches.
Miguel Lavaro, I nailed that. Hey boys, been waiting for about a year now, 110, 150 with 220 at 92. Thoughts of getting in a snatch, and should I compete at 89 or 96? I'm 57 inches, if that helps. Thanks, lads. So to start with the weight, Dara's pointing up because he wants you to go up to 96. So in weightlifting, unless, for drastic reasons, more body weight is always better for weightlifting. That's why there's weight classes. In regards to getting ready to a snatch, if you've been waiting for a year with a 220 back squat, the likelihood is, you're quite strong before you started weightlifting. And so it's not that your snatch isn't getting better. It's just that the particular qualities for your clean and jerk were higher before you started weightlifting. So you were probably a talented athlete, and you're able to realize those strengths into a clean and jerk faster with the snatch. The snatch is something that requires a minimum of a decade to kind of be truly close to being a master at that. So at 110 after the year is just good progress. The 150 is just a lot better progress. So I wouldn't be too concerned. Ensure that you're chasing technical mastery for the snatch is the main concern there. And if you feel like you are actively trying to do the correct things for technical mastery, then I think you should be okay. I wouldn't be too concerned. 110 after the year is very good. If you want specific work on your snatch, we have 3 snatch programs. So we have weak overhead, snatch PB, and swinging the barbell, or weak pull in the snatch. So I would definitely just recommend the getting better at the snatch, for example, would be a good way to do about that if you want something specific for 8 weeks. So that'll just do your snatch programming. So yeah.
Up next, I'm after losing it now.
Will small calves limit my squat? So no. But Saleas and gastrocnemius and all that are very related to the ability to produce force from the lower limbs, and knee control and all that crack. So it kind of hurt to have bigger calves. And you can fool people with shallower depth if you have huge calves.
You do get some stacking of the lower hamstring onto the calves that will give you a bit more tension through the knee, which is nice. Be like the equivalent of having a knee sleeve on, but they're not vital. Okay, Guido Kuiper. I definitely didn't get that right. Thoughts on hamstring versus quad development, how to tell what needs work, and what are some golden strength standards regarding strength numbers on the two. Golden numbers going to change a lot from sport to sport. To be honest, double body weight back squat, 2.5 times body weight deadlift is about where it should be. And you can reverse back from there and get those relative ratios if you're not at double body weight or 2.5 times body weight. In terms of hamstring versus quad development, I think it's about 50% genetics and 50% what sports you played when you were a kid. Because a lot of field athletes will have really tight hip flexors, pretty well developed quads, and they'll have horrendous hamstring mobility, and their hamstrings will be like cables running across the back of their legs. Whereas a lot of martial arts people will have much better kind of, or more equal development of the two. If you're looking for hamstring versus quads and where you might be weak, I wouldn't go for squat numbers or deadlift numbers, though. I'd probably start off with hamstring Nordic and then a quad Nordic. And you'll immediately see with those, like, your level of efficacy with both of them. It doesn't have to be that you should be able to do 10 quad Nordics versus 10 hamstring Nordics. But you'll see if you're really struggling to do a quad Nordic with good technique, yet you can do a number of hamstring Nordics with good technique, then I think that will give you a very, very good idea. The other thing you could look at is if you're a weightlifter, you can certainly look at your technique and you'll know immediately if someone has weak quads or if they have a weak posterior chain. Powerlifting, it'll be very the same way when you look at their squat. So there's a number of ways to tell, but it's probably not just going to be back squat number versus RDL number.
Jim Wendler had a great quote that was, if your quads aren't hanging over your knees like an elephant's testicles, then you probably don't have an imbalance or there's not a huge issue in the ratio. Just assume both are weak, and then train them accordingly. Yeah, like Fitz said, it definitely depends on your sport. So, for example, for a weightlifter, you'd probably like to see your pull and your squat being basically the same thing, or you'd like to see your RDLs being your clean and jerk for maybe RDL your clean and jerk for like 2 or 3 reps, maybe 3 to 5 reps if you're on the money with your RDLs and you train them actively. But for other sports to be different. For a sprinter, you'd probably be looking at hyper focus on your hamstrings as opposed to maybe you'd be looking at maybe a lot more focus on hamstrings versus your quads.
So G-Man or G-Man says, thanks for the amazing content. You're welcome. I hope you enjoy it. What kind of exercise do you recommend for golf? I'm 87 kilos. Are there any ratios I should be trying to hit? So the usual prerequisites: double body weight back squat, 2.5 times body weight deadlift. You want a bench press that's around 1.2 times body weight. I think would be very, very effective. If you had those 3 numbers, you're doing very, very, very well in terms of being strong enough. To be honest, for golf, for those kind of skilled sports, I usually have like a 3-step mantra that I'll spit out at people. The first thing is you must have the mobility to achieve the position for the swing you want, right? So if you want an effective swing, you have to be able to rotate your hips in a certain way. You have to have certain mobility in your hips, your midline, and you have to be able to control that movement. So mobility is incredibly important. That will probably start with a focus on flexibility first, and then building strength and control through that range of flexibility, and that will become mobility. Once you have mobility, then you must be strong in those positions. So that's where your squat, your deadlift, your strict press, your bent over row will come into it. And then once you have enough mobility and enough strength, then you can look at power. So then you can look at moving the barbell fast. You can look at moving weighted implements fast. You can look at moving elastic implements quickly against some sort of force. So that's generally what I'd say for golf would be the way to go. A friend of mine has a very good app for golf, and it's called Fit for Golf, and his name is Mike Carroll. If you're looking for strength and conditioning work there, that's where I would go. Very, very intuitive, incredibly successful coach. So it's called Fit for Golf, and Mike Carroll is his name.
Self-employed is saying, what's a good drill for footwork in the jerk? I definitely don't feel comfortable moving feet. Best drill is just empty bar split jerks. That's the best one. Just practice that and practice. If you don't feel comfortable moving your feet, then you just want to practice that specific motor pattern until it's, there's no shortcuts to that, or there's no kind of ingenious methods to circumnavigate that teaching pattern or learning pattern for your body. You just have to do loads of repetitions of that particular movement you want and ensure that you can do it at lighter weights. If you can't do it at lighter weights, obviously you can't do it at heavier weights, but definitely just repeating that as much as possible before and after every session with an empty barbell, or as Dara likes to talk about, you're waiting to cook your food or whatever, just high repetitions of that foot movement as much as possible is how you is the drill. The act of doing the split jerk is the drill to improve your foot coordination for the split jerk.
One thing to kind of piggyback onto Garth, what isn't the drill is kicking clips out of the way or jumping over a plate or something where you're really going to actively change how your feet move. You do want to keep it as specific as possible. think those really weird drills where you have like a stick on the floor and you have to kick the stick, or you might have to move your foot over something. They work in like a very specific environment and only to be used in acute cases. The only drill you really need, unless you've those very specific issues, is the actual movement itself.
Kind of thickest thing. Do you think the NFL Combine is a good process to identify talents? Oh, it's so funny. We have that on the list of videos.
It's on the list.
Long story short, it actually is, bar the AMRAP at 100 kilos on the bench. That just doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense whatsoever. It should either be, at minimum, a factor of your body weight, but in reality, it should be a 1 repetition test or a velocity
at a given percentage of 1 rep max.
Yeah, or a given percentage of your body weight.
Yeah,
would be far better. The AMRAP just makes no sense.
Do you know the issues with the NFL Combine arise due to legacy issues?
Yes.
People like the NFL Combine, and they televise the NFL Combine, and they televise the college training days where you see people and they're getting ready to try out. All of that is so appealing because there's a massive legacy of this event as it goes back years and years and years, and they have all the combine events, and you know that he was a number 1 draft pick, this guy was the number 1 draft pick, but this guy's 40-yard dash was 0.3 of a second faster or whatever. That's where it's both the beauty and the fucking beast of the NFL style combine, is that it's class because you have all the data, but also it gets held back from being very, very ecologically valid today for NFL games today. Due to the fact that you wanted to be able to match up to what was there before.
Didn't Tom Brady come? Was he the last pick at the combine or something like that? Or
yes, he wasn't first pick anyway. I don't think.
Apparently performed quite poorly at combines, and then
he's not exactly a specimen when you look at him.
Well,
obviously up here,
yeah,
and like in his arm, he's phenomenal. But
no,
very, very good for his job. And then you're asking, is there a reason such thing doesn't exist for other sports? This exists in every single professional sport.
It's America, that's why.
No, but it exists everywhere. Like if you want to be a professional rugby player from the age of 16 to 18, you will have massive amounts of tests done on you. It just isn't a combine where it's just
hey.
It's not a combine where it's the same test every time. Each club will have a separate test. Under the IRFU system, the 4 professional clubs in Ireland will use very similar testing, but there's still some gratitude there where most of the time, if you're like an underage player, an under 18 or a youth player, you're doing gym tests and you're doing some sort of aerobic tests, and then you'll have tests on the field or skills tests as well. That data is really only looked at by your direct superior in terms of your coach. So it'll be the head coach of the Munster youth team you are going to play for, and then possibly the team above them, so the 20s coach or whatever it's going to be. It's not being looked at by all of the fans and all the fantasy football fans and the draft pickers. Like most of the time, you go to a club, you're on trial with a club, you're in a development squad with a club. They have their range of tests. They have their combine. They'll perform these over a number of months or a couple of years, and they'll see your progression as you go through those. It'll be like Illinois T tests, yo-yo tests, beep tests. All of these different tests will be done. They'll probably do DEXA scans. They'll do multiple different data points over a long period of time, and that's how they figure out your physical prowess. So there are combines in almost every other sport. It's just not the NFL combine.
So
Erico Oliveira.
Sorry, I had one thing to say about the combine.
Go on.
I think you have to hand it to the NFL. They've made the combine a very interesting part of the sport.
So cool.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's all I'd say about it.
Okay. Erico Oliveira says, we recently made a video going over why every minute on the minute isn't great for cardiovascular conditioning. On that subject, do you believe there's any novel way to train your conditioning in order to overcome psychological barriers? So there's loads of ways to make yourself better aerobically, right? Every minute on the minute will make you better aerobically. HIIT training in general will make you better aerobically. There's a lot of data out there on HIIT training, time interval stuff, Tabata stuff. inverse tabata. There's a massive amount of ways to get better aerobically. The issue is that in almost all of them, you're restricting the time interval, you're restricting the rest interval, and you're increasing intensity of the exercise you're doing. The issue that arises there is that you're putting more load through your joints. You're usually producing more damage in the muscle tissues themselves. You're probably going to be more fatigued for your sport-specific training or your power training or your strength training, the other training you're doing. So there's a massive amount of ways. You could use every minute on the minute on a exercise bike, on a rowing machine. You could do Tabata on kettlebell swings. You could do whatever you wanted, and you will get a very good aerobic outcome from it. But what we're talking about is the best way to do it, and the best way for an athlete to do it, and the most effective way to do it, the most efficient way to do it. So there are certainly, you can go on 20 different Instagram pages that have EMOM in the name of their page, and they'll give you an every minute on the minute workout every day, and they will make you much fitter than you currently are, or fitter than you currently are. The issue for us is that it's just not the most effective way or the most efficient way of becoming more aerobically fit.
So Aaron's asking how often do weightlifting camps. So it'll just currently be once a year realistically, going forward. So this year's one will be the only one this year.
If you want to hold one, if you have a facility where you want to hold a weightlifting camp, you just need to reach out to us. We're always open for opportunities, but at the moment it's just one booked in for this year. They take a lot of time, and obviously we work with the athletes for 3 or 4 weeks leading into the camp, and then there's the time in the camp itself. So it's not just like a seminar where we show up for a weekend and we do the 1 day or the 2 days of the seminar, and you vomit information at people and try and give people as much information to take away as possible and really work in that time. Like, you're talking about the camps being a much more involved process, and hopefully a much more involved process in terms of their long-term progression.
Yeah, we want to make sure, like, those few weeks leading up to take a lot of time. I want to make sure people, get a lot out of the camps.
Sean Byrne says, what would be your thoughts on using hand cleans and power cleans for a sport like rowing? I've seen quite a few national team athletes around the world use them to varying quality, however. Yeah, so power clean, hang power clean is almost always in programming for rowers. I only have one rower on the books at the moment. He certainly has hang power cleans in there. They're beneficial in the fact that the motor pattern you're following is similar enough to the sport. It's not identical, but you're really activating the posterior chain and the anterior chain. It's in that kind of area on the force velocity curve, so they're powerful movements. You're not really slowing down, so I think they are very good, and they're easy enough to learn for the vast majority of athletes.
Alan Feeney saying, does cardio Anthony saying, if you'd recommend 2 or 3 mobility exercises to do daily, what would they be? So definitely sitting in a full squat would be very, very useful. Some kind of overhead mobility stuff would be very, very important. So that kind of straight armed praying stretch where you've your hands propped up on something, that'd be quite good. And then
I think the last one, so this is really comes down to where you yourself are most restricted, because this is going to apply to almost no one else. But if I was to say, for the vast majority of people, if they're already doing the 2 that Garth was saying, so sitting in a deep squat and then doing some sort of like preacher or prayer stretch overhead, I'd probably want like the frog squat. So shins flat on the floor, toes pointed out to the side, your knees are out wide on the floor, and then you're anteriorly tilting your pelvis and pushing it back over your heels. That's a very, very good stretch for a lot of people, particularly people who sit at a desk a lot, just to externally rotate those hips and get yourself opened up.
Alan is saying, does cardio any effect on body composition bar its relation to fat loss? Runners have a type of muscular posture that gym rats don't. So in terms of body composition, so you're looking at like fast twitch to slow twitch fiber distribution. So you'll be excessive amounts of cardio will be actively encouraging fast twitch to slow twitch fiber percentage distribution in your muscles. You'll certainly have a catabolic effect from cardio. So it's, an innate
I think that's one of the big ones is like the catabolic effect on muscle.
So you just have an innate, your body will have an innate desire to get rid of muscle if you provide enough stimulus of doing cardiovascular work. You're just going to want to lose that muscle. It's inefficient. Every kilo of body weight lost is a drastic impact on VO2 max. So the composition, to a certain extent, especially if an athlete is not using a lot of performance enhancing drugs, excessive amounts of cardio, that tolerance for cardio will be a lot lower than it would be for performance enhanced athletes. However, natural athletes can still do a significant amount of cardio before it will have a negative effect. So more than you'd see the average strength athlete do, for example. So in terms of our fat loss, it would just be the maintenance of muscle mass and your body's desire to maintain muscle mass while doing a lot of cardio, because it doesn't make sense in relation to for that particular activity. So doing cardio, your body responds to the stimulus you're putting on it, and if you're doing a lot of cardio, that's not going to be it.
One thing I will say as well about people who are doing a lot of cardio, there tends to be a lot more systematic stress or general stress going on than there will be for somebody who's just doing general S&C work. So the duration of training for middle to long distance runners is very, very high. Like 50 miles a week isn't unheard of. That level of training and that volume of training just means everything is heightened and everything is under stress almost all the time. Like you see massive changes in body composition due to that stress. Like you won't be able to gain muscle as easily. You won't be able to hold on to it as easily. You'll actually end up holding on to a bit of adipose tissue purely due to the fact that you've heightened cortisol levels for so much of your week or your training day. So that is something to keep in mind, that when the mileage is very, very high, hormonally you can be compromised. Sean Creed wants to know, how's the shed progressing?
I should have it month after next, which is still quite a while, but it's cool. I'll be okay for another few weeks. So the concrete base is poured, but no shed yet. Do you want to pick a few there? You've got a 5.
I have a call in 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, we'll pick a few random ones. Andrew said he did bench 150 kilos on Monday. So yeah, that's that. He says you're looking big as well.
Thanks, bye. No diets, no videos on diets for trained athletes. Not really something we'd ever do, the nutrition, but we might have a guest on.
The guest.
We might have a guest on who might be able to
coming on
talk about that.
Maybe he'll talk about a very, very good diet protocol for athletes.
Like a
diet that was specifically made for athletes.
Like a diet in a particular plane of motion.
Yeah. Oh,
you're thinking
certain direction.
Like a certain plane of motion. Yeah. Interesting.
This diet could be seen as a vector quantity rather than a scalar quantity.
Yes. Might be someone about that.
Oh, very exciting. I wonder who that guest is.
Who knows?
Someone's asking here, just to clear it up, is it possible to buy the RTA without a credit card? Yeah, you can buy it with a debit card. If you just have PayPal and you don't have any card, you can just email us and we'll generate a PayPal invoice for you, so you can buy it any way you want. Okay, George Kinnell says, how badly will going on holiday and only getting 2 sessions in for 10 days before my comp wreck my peak? It depends how close the competition is. If the competition is within a month of you getting back to training, it will be pretty detrimental.
How badly will going on a holiday and only getting 2 sessions in for 10? That's not great.
It's not great.
That's not great.
It really isn't great.
Especially for weightlifting. If that was powerlifting,
if it was powerlifting, it wouldn't matter.
Weightlifting is the sport-specific stuff.
And you really have to keep the sport-specific stuff all the way up to the end, So it really depends. Oh, he says it's weightlifting.
Yeah. It's not great, to be honest.
It really isn't great. If it's like, say, if it's 6 weeks before your competition, it's just not ideal, but you'll get back in quite good shape in 6 weeks. But if it's kind of within the month of competition, just cancel your holiday.
Yeah.
Or else move to a different competition.
James is saying, I've noticed that in general, amateur level CrossFitters appear to carry as much, if not more, muscle mass than the majority of similar level natural tested bodybuilders, drug testing aside, and reasons for.
I have 2 things to say on this.
I think you would just be shocked at the amount of amateur CrossFitters who use performance-enhancing drugs. And we talked about this before in the drug testing CrossFit video, which was a while ago. I think you would just absolutely be flabbergasted. You'd be kerfuffled.
If you go to an amateur level CrossFit competition in any first world country, pretty much the majority of people in the RX division will be on gear. I'd say I happily enough say that.
On the male side for sure.
On the male side, that's it's not as prevalent on the female, but it's still prevalent. But the other thing I will say is that amateur natty bodybuilders, I think a lot of the time get their training a bit mixed up, and they're just not they end up spending a huge amount of the time in this semi-cut stage, and they'll go into a bulk. Like, the bodybuilding system should be in a surplus for the vast majority of their year, and then aggressively cutting down, or they'll do a mini cut and then aggressively bulk, and then a mini cut and aggressively bulk. I think the issue at the moment with the natty physique kind of swimwear model bodybuilders is that they spend all year in good shape. They never accumulate significant amounts of muscle tissue because they're always worried about having the abs or being very low body fat percentages. And then they just spin their wheels for a long time. And most of the time they're going to the gym, they're just going to the gym and getting a pump and not actually training to progressively overload and induce a significant hypertrophy effect. Most of the time they just go to the gym, get a pump, become tired, burn calories and go home again. They stay in this constant homeostasis of counting calories, not ever gaining enough tissue, and then they just end up looking kind of like teenagers forever.
Daniel Clemens is saying, hi lads, what are your thoughts on using apnea for increasing CO2 tolerance and tolerance for lower oxygen O2 levels, not only for diving, but other endurance exercises?
Apnea?
So that'd just be like expelling breath and just holding in absence of breath. So they're two different things. So tolerance for CO2 and low oxygen would be two different things in terms of training for those. Apnea for CO2 tolerance is a thing. It's a little bit more, not fringe, but it's less common. You'll see some people talking about it. You'll see some therapists talking about they like for their patients to be able to tolerate a high CO2 environment in their blood for like a minute or so. And if you can't get to a minute, then there's probably an issue there. You know, some people do have extreme stress responses to high levels of CO2. And if you do one of those tests and you find that you have an issue with that CO2 tolerance, or you have an intolerance to high levels of CO2, then it's definitely something worth training. The apps, so the lower O2 levels though is a different thing for training for. So you'd want specific equipment in relation to, you know, altitude things. You not an actual just little mass that restricts the airflow going into your lungs, but you actually want a fucking small generator in front of you that restricts the quantity of oxygen without restricting the force with which your breath or your diaphragm contracts to bring in air. So they're kind of two different things. That CO2 tolerance thing is definitely a thing. And some people do have stress responses for some reason to high levels of CO2. A lot of times there'll be mouth breathers. So stuff like that. It's definitely something to work for. I don't think you need to be hyper excessive on it for your conditioning training. You know, that CO2 tolerance for a lot of people, specific conditioning will come along with high levels of conditioning and doing it. Sometimes you'll see that CO2 tolerance or intolerance can sometimes be, you'll hear some therapists talk about it as a muscular. It's kind of like it's a defensive mechanism in relation to certain muscular issues or potential, you know, kind of injuries or something like that, which is quite interesting. So it's certainly a thing. I don't think it's massively useful, but it's definitely a thing, and it's definitely worth looking into if you're serious about your conditioning. But for most people, it balances out quite well with just smart conditioning training. The low O2 level thing, you know, it's the big thing, and I think everyone knows about this. Everybody and their dogs, and their dog's dog is, you know, live high and train low rather than live low and train, you know, certain altitudes with oxygen levels. So you want to be living at them to get those hyper responses of erythropoietin in your blood, and then run down to your game day place and play at normal level, you know, or just take EPO. Who knows?
We'll see you next week.
Thumbs up to TPO, is it? Oh, well done.
We'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for all the great questions.